Well, good afternoon. As my bio read, I have over 35 years of experience managing projects in the public, private, and nonprofit sector. So I don't like to give you the exact number of years, it just let you know I'm old. Okay, so I work for the Ministry of Central Services, and I've done that for much of my my working career. I did take a brief travel through liquor and gaming. I worked at Saskatchewan Liquor and Gaming for a while, and it wasn't nearly as much fun as I thought it was going to be. But anyway, I was there for 6 years, and then I managed to come back to where I started in the projects group in Central Services. So just to give you a little bit of background on what Central Services does, we're kind of like in terms of property, we're kind of the property owner, the landlord to government. So facilities like the one we're in, the ministry owns, and then we basically have occupants of other government ministries and agencies like Sask Polytechnic. So we do a lot of projects. We do 200 or 300 projects a year. And typically those projects involve infrastructure work where we're maintaining assets like Sask Polytechnic here. I think we're in the middle of 2 roof replacement projects here. We do energy and sustainability projects where we're looking at improving the environmental footprint associated with our government buildings, that type of thing. Building envelope as well, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, all that sort of thing, as well as upgrading building interiors. Many of our buildings are getting, some of them are significantly older than me, so we have to do a fair amount of maintenance to keep those buildings up. One of the more visible examples in Regina would be the dome refurbishment that we did on the legislative building that some of you may have seen, the new copper dome that is now weathering as we intended it to do. So in addition to that, we also do projects on behalf of our government clients that occupy our buildings, typically tenant improvements. We'll build new buildings for programs such as the Saskatchewan Disease Control Lab, which is out in this end of town. We also do special purpose facilities and renovations and additions. So we're not only doing work on our own buildings, we're doing work at the customer's direction, I guess, and the customer being the clients that live in the space. And we typically do that through contracts. We don't have our own, we have our own small construction company, construction group, but for the most part we do this through contracting with the private sector, and that's what I'm going to talk to you a bit about today. But we typically have about 250 contracts a year that we award for various types of construction all over the province. So do I have the clicker here? I do. Works. Okay, so that's good. In terms of BIM implementation, we're approaching BIM in terms of the total value proposition. What we're trying to do with our building portfolio is look at maximizing the total value over the building life. And part of that includes lower total cost of ownership in terms of the public facility assets. We're also looking at when we're doing those projects that I mentioned, we like to try to avoid cost overruns. You probably as government, we like to stay out of the paper. We like to stay off the news, except when it's a new program or service that we're offering. We want to generate improved project understanding. Basically, what we see a big advantage from using BIM would be the idea that it improves communication because of the data that's available for the building. And we tend to find that a lot of problems that we have with projects boil down to a lack of communication or incorrect communication. The other aspect that we try to do is we try to involve more stakeholders and get them more engaged in the planning and design of their facilities, so that we can ensure that we meet their long-term needs as well as what they might for example want at the start of the project. So that's it. That's it. The strategic approach that we plan to take here is to leverage the best value procurement policy, and I'm just going to give you a bit about the best value procurement policy that you may not be aware of. In September of 2016, we were enabled by some new legislation that was put through, and I think Greg, later you're going to hear from Greg Lusk, who's going to give you a little bit more information about this legislation. Following consultations with industry, we began using a modified public tender document for construction procurement. In the past, we were only in a position legally to award contracts to the lowest qualified bidder. So that meant that any sort of innovations that a contractor might want to bring, they had to do at their expense. And now we're able to look at contractors and as well with consultants as what value can you bring to the ministry in terms of undertaking those projects, and how can we benefit from that. So that's where we're going with best value. We've termed that type of an approach as looking at achieving the best value on our procurement rather than just the lowest cost. So our intention is to leverage that best value policy by placing value on BIM. So whether it's a consultant or a contractor or a supplier, if they're able to provide for our needs in terms of BIM, we would be giving that favorable consideration in deciding who the contractors are that we're going to be working with, who the contractors and consultants might be. So BIM really enables us to begin with the end in mind. It allows us to look at the long-term life of the facility, not just the construction project, which everyone can see and is visible. Once the project is finished, then somebody has to live with that building for 50 years or more, and we want to make sure we maximize the value of that in the long term, and we believe that's something that BIM can offer us. We partner with the private sector to build basically a competitive open digital construction market. By providing digital information about our buildings, we feel that contractors will be in a better position to manage the work that we're asking them to do in those buildings. We're also taking steps to coordinate a Western Canadian approach, public sector approach on a common standard. This is something that we've been having some conversations with the government of Alberta, who has taken some early steps towards BIM. We have some infrastructure advantages in our ministry that we may be able to leverage the work that Alberta has been doing to come to a more common standard. As was said earlier, if government, we own a lot of buildings. If we get on the BIM bandwagon, I think there is some benefit to the industry in terms of that leadership. We just basically have a critical mass between government of Alberta and government of Saskatchewan that would drive the industry towards a common standard. And we want to move towards that as a standard for all our facilities. So this work in terms of BIM has been led within our ministry by Kirk Banadyga, who I will turn this over to now. We were fortunate enough to have Kirk available to come and help us with BIM and a lot of other implementations that we're doing with best value and that sort of thing. But anyway, thanks, and I will turn this over to Kirk.
Thank you, Harlan. I'd like to just continue and talk a bit about the best value proposition that we think BIM can bring to a project, and particularly to the province. Before I start, I really do have to commend Sask Polytech for approaching technology the way they have been it tends to be a catalyst in the industry, helping the industry along both on the consulting side and the construction side of things. Things are rapidly changing, as we all know, and we're going to see some fundamental change within not only the construction sector or consulting sector, but also the construction sector. So as students going into that marketplace, my perception is there is nothing but opportunity, and it's on an increasing curve rather than a declining curve. So good work, and stick at it, because you really are on the right track, in my opinion. Now, just coming back to government, as many of you know, government has been in the CAD environment for some time, and going back a few decades now as a consultant, it really was government adopting AutoCAD that really helped drive the consulting sector to new levels of technology. And I believe the same thing is and will happen within the total BIM environment. The government, as Harlan mentioned, really wants to get on side, leverage what investment we have, both in terms of physical assets and software assets and technology assets. And part of my responsibility within government is to try to help make that happen. This is very current. We're just in the early stages, so you're certainly not behind if you haven't heard anything about it, because it's all new. At the moment, we have a working group within industry, the Saskatchewan Association of Architects and the Association of Consulting Engineers of Saskatchewan. The best value procurement has created a lot of change within that construction climate, and with that working group, we're initially starting off with new request for proposal techniques, construction, contract changes that best value brings, and ultimately we'll be diving down into BIM implementation with the consulting sector and the contracting sector, but that's still yet to come. As Harlan mentioned, we're starting or beginning with the end in mind, and the end really with the government of Saskatchewan is all the tool sets and leverage that BIM and BIM data can bring to operate the facility through the life of the facility. Government largely at the moment manages their physical assets with a piece of software called Archibus. Part of the BIM implementation will be making sure that what we do within the BIM data environment talks directly to Archibus. And within the asset value of assets, the government's been using, the old name is RECAP. It's morphed into VFA. Yeah, VFA. Anyways, all part of the asset management, but within Archibus is whole maintenance management package. So the information there really will drill right down to building operators and owners, and therefore there will be a huge or growing demand on when you're designing buildings or building buildings is to add information to the model that can be tapped by government and by existing government software programs. Now, moving in this direction really wasn't done just on a whim. We believe BIM brings a number of public sector benefits. There's the economic benefits with improved quality of goods and services, and this is right through the entire life cycle of the built asset. We think there's better value for the dollars with the BIM approach, and without getting into a whole lot of detail, there's the obvious economic benefits, the what-if scenarios that can be played at a very early stage and onwards. There are some social benefits. I believe BIM will improve project understanding through the tool set that it is, not only data, but the ability to communicate design in 3 dimensions and moving from a flat 2-dimensional world into a full 3D environment. With the advantages that BIM can bring, I think we'll see better designed projects, and I mean that in the holistic sense, everyone that participates, just not architectural design. And I believe it'll produce buildings that are more aligned with stakeholder needs. And then I think some obvious improved social outcomes. We end up with better resource planning, planning of using resources, limited resources in the province. We can design in greater flexibility and therefore get greater use, better use of existing facilities. Now, I'm not going to go into line by line the areas for BIM benefits, but if you trace project right through from conception, pre-design, right through detailed design and construction and onwards, that there are a number of areas that we will be targeting or exploring. We want to kind of benchmark where we're at the moment, and then develop a methodology that 2 or 3 years out we can begin to see what real tangible benefits the BIM world will bring government. Within the design phases, this is a document from Bentley Systems, and I think most of the figures or factors here, from my experience, are relatively conservative, but we can see savings in design time, clash detecting at the early stages, material schedules, bills of quantities can all assist not only in the budgeting, early budgeting, but in bringing, I think, better construction costs at the end of the day. Following it through the procurement phases, construction and commissioning, there are again more recognized areas for BIM benefits, all of which we will look at and prioritize and focus in on a few key areas. And then the big part of it, sort of the 80 or 90% of the project's really focused on its ongoing operations. We want to, as I mentioned earlier, tie the BIM model directly to current operations and facility management software that we have and are under development. So anyone interested in working for government, there's some very interesting areas to get involved here on the data management side that we were talking about earlier. Now, central services, we have set up a working group committee. We're at the very early stage. We are going to be exploring all of BIM's uses through planning and design, as you see here, and focusing in on those uses that we think bring value or great benefit to the government as large property owners. Some of the areas that we're looking at in construction and the operation phase, looking at existing conditions, cost estimation, I think will be large. 3D coordination, again, that I think will allow better communication with the stakeholders, and obviously in the construction phase, just better communication with contractors and suppliers out there. I'm a believer that we'll see huge changes in the area of digital fabrication, the concept of going straight from the design computer to the fabrication floor, and with huge time savings on shop drawing turnarounds, and the notion that everyone's using the same model, working from the same model, working from the same digital information, as opposed to where we've been through the past millenniums in converting everything back to paper, handing off paper, and sort of regurgitating the process each step of the way. Finally, we're reach a point where I think we can seamlessly hand off information or tie back information to a model that we at government will use when all said and done for the operation of the facility. Now, I'll just have limited time. I'll just talk a little bit about our approach to BIM implementation. Phase one is the initiation phase. We have established an internal a task group. We will be developing a mandate with activities. The committee will be a simple structure with the key divisions of central services that I've listed here being represented on that committee. So it covers off all aspects from project management on through to property management within the corporation. The this task group will develop our own BIM policy, but we've decided right from the get-go that we're going to try not to reinvent the wheel, and we will emulate sort of the best of business that's out there. As Harlan mentioned a bit earlier, we have had some initial meetings with the government of Alberta. I've met with my counterpart in Alberta. They're very much on side and are a great believer in not reinventing the wheel, not developing their own individual sets of standards, but we can develop a set of standards that that we can share across the country, particularly across Western Canada. The phase 2, which is not too far in the future, is the consultation phase, and we will identify and engage with stakeholders. And it's a full range of stakeholders, not only internally but externally. As I mentioned earlier, working with the architects and working with the engineers in Saskatchewan, as well as working with contractors and major suppliers to talk about BIM implementation, and then develop a roadmap. I think the bottom line here is that the train is moving in the BIM direction, and the sooner that everyone is on the same train, I think the better it will be for everyone involved. The third phase will be the implementation phase, and our intention at the government is to do this by way of a pilot project or projects, plural. We are not going to speed to the marketplace, but as part of the best value, we will be writing into future requests for proposals, both at the consulting level and at the construction level, that those that are BIM literate will receive a better grading than those that are not. We hope by, much like happened with AutoCAD, that the government adopting BIM will help spur the construction industry to new heights in Saskatchewan. So stay tuned, and you haven't missed anything to this point in time, but again, repeating myself, stay tuned and watch, because it is happening and it is inevitable. Thank you.